Assalamu alaikum, and thank you all for coming to Imam al-Asr's joint al-Ghadir and al-Mubahalah celebration. Before we begin, I would like to thank the sponsors of tonight's program, Sister Taskeen and Brother Hassan Mahdi. Please recite as-Fatiha for the marhumeen of the sponsors and all of our marhumeen. Please recite aloud salawat.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم جاءك من العلم فقل تعالوا ندع أبناءكم وأنفسنا وأنفسكم ثم نبتهل فنجعل لعنة الله على الكاذبين. إنها قصص الحق ما من إله إلا وإن الله هو العزيز الحكيم. فإن تولوا فإن الله بالمفسدين. قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا سواء بيننا وبين لا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضا من دون الله فإن فقولوا اشهدوا بأننا مسلمون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most Jesus before Allah, that of Adam. Then said to him, be he was. The truth comes from your Lord Allah. Be of God. If anyone disputes this matter with you, now after full knowledge has come to you, say, come. Our sons, our women, your women, ourselves and yourselves. Then let us pray and invoke the law on those who lie. This is the true account. There is no God except Allah, and Allah, He is indeed the exalted in power, the wise. But if they turn back, Allah has full knowledge of those who do mischief. Say, O people of the book, come to common terms as between us and you, that we worship none but Allah, that we associate no partners with Him, that we erect not from amongst ourselves than Allah. If they turn back, say, bear witness that we at least are Muslims. bowing to Allah's will. Salawat.
Thank you, Brother Imam, for that beautiful recitation and translation of Surah Al-Imran. Now I would like to call Sara Razavi for a short poem. Please recite another loud salawat.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله الذي جعل المؤمنين Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. And foremost, I would love to congratulate you all on the auspicious occasion of Eid al-Ghadir and Eid al-Mubahalah as well, which made me recall on the verse that was revealed on this special occasion, which was stated as the best verse that reveals the best of merit of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which he is being introduced as Nafs Rasulullah. Salawat. So in these two momentous occasions, no matter the circumstance, I was recalled in our life journey, our purpose, is to gain nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what better way to gain nearness to Him than through Imam Ali and the Ahlul Bayt. Salawat by them. So to personify this journey of ours, I decided to write a poetry reciting to you all our life journey and how Imam Ali is connected to all of this. I am on a journey towards God, thrusting myself above and beyond, looking for a spark, for my place is among the constellations. My place is among the constellations, depicting kaleidoscopes of colliding hopes and dreams, to place myself above the angels, to place myself in the infinite horizons to God's limitless love. I go to the horizons. How can I go to God who is indescribable and impeccable, who is irrevocable and impenetrable, whose worth cannot be counted, whose worth cannot be described by speakers, and whose bounties cannot be counted by calculators? For God's beauty cannot be explained nor described, but experienced and perceived. And what greater thing to experience than God's love around me? I experience His love with His blessings, and I see it with a certain heart. But of all the signs and symbols I see, I only see one outshining them all. I see it from the one who was born in the Kaaba. I see it from the one named Haydar. I see it from the peak of eloquence. I see it from the intelligence. I see it from the wielder of Zulfiqar. I see it from the victor of Badr and Uhud. I see it from the one who lifted Khaybar in my soul. I see it from the one who won the heart of heaven's fruit, not with silence, but with serene silence. I see it from the one who gave his ring to the poor. I see it from the one who shook the tyrant's throne. I see it from the teacher of justice, the leader of righteousness, the protector of all and the needy's call. I see it from the hand held high. I see it from the one who was struck in prostration and offered his killer water. I see it from my prince, my king, my spark, my Mawla, my Ali, a name so beautiful it hurts and blesses and heals the most broken of hearts. God's gift to humanity. The defender of truth, my pride, my lantern, and my guide. For this poem would mean nothing if Ali was not by my side. Overflow with Ali the way Matham did without shame. And let every part of my body do the same for eternity.
All right, please recite another loud salawat. I would now like to call Brother Muhammad Ibrahim for a short poem. Please recite another loud salawat.
Salawat. جانم فدا حیدری یا علی علی علی. He's the lion of bravery, Ya Ali, Ali, Ali. He eases all difficulties, oh Ali, Ali, Ali. If Muhammad is day, then night is Ali. The only way to live peacefully, say Ali. The jewel of our faith is Haydar Ali. The one who broke the gate of Khaybar is Ali. The first drop of pure mercy is none but Ali. My master and leader and teacher Ali. Ali, Mawla Ali. I'd give my life for Ali. Ya Ali, Ali, Ali. He's the lion of bravery. Ya Ali, Ali, Ali. He eases all difficulties. Oh Ali, Ali, Ali. From dusk till dawn, let this pen write. I pray that your name my lips always recite, for this is your right, Islam's greatest night. Enemies in fear would run out of sight. Why should I then worry in the face of tragedy? The one who supports the lonely is Ali. Ali, Master Ali, may your mention never cease. Ya Ali, Ali, Ali. He's the lion of bravery. Ya Ali, Ali, Ali. He eases all difficulties. Oh Ali, Ali, Ali. You're the king of Najaf, oh Haydar Ali. To your shrine your lovers like beggars they flee, for you clothe the needy and feed the hungry. Even kings bow down to your majesty. Your virtues amount to infinity. The Kaaba's wall cracked in two in your love, Ali. Ali, Mawla Ali. You are the pride of Hashemis. Ya Ali, Ali, Ali. He's the lion of bravery. Ya Ali, Ali, Ali. for praise. What more can I write, Ali? The tongue never tires praising your glory. Your Zulfikar would strike blows so mighty, yet you live life so generously and humbly. The strength of Zahra, father of Abu Abdullah, you trained Abbas, the brave warrior. Ali, Master Ali. Salawat.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad, for that very beautiful recitation. I would now like to call Murtaza Abbas for a short poem as well. Please recite another loud salawat.
Please recite another loud salawat. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Shahe Mardan, Ya Shahe Mardan, Ya Shahe Mardan. For Haqq and Batil, you are the Mizan, you are the Mizan, Mawla Ali Jan. Ali, you are the one no one could assail, the selfless warrior history shall hail, the one for who the Lord sent al-Zulfiqar, the one who Mustafa titled al-Qadar, the one who Mustafa titled al-Qadar. Mawla Ali Jan, Mawla Ali Jan. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Shahe Mardan, Ya Shahe Mardan, Ya Shahe Mardan. For Haqq and Batil, you are the Mizan, you are the Mizan, Mawla Ali Jan. Your mother Fatima, she named you Haydar, and like a lion you won Khandaq Khaybar. Shab-e Hijrat, we see you as Murtada. Ghadir khum, we hear man kuntu mawla. Ghadir khum, we hear man kuntu mawla. Mawla Ali Jan, Mawla Ali Jan. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Shahe Mardan, Ya Shahe Mardan, Ya Shahe Mardan. For Haqq and Batil, you are the Mizan, you are the Mizan, Mawla Ali Jan. Your patience, piety, moral excellence, your knowledge, empathy, peak of eloquence. If your example all Muslims could embrace, we would be paragons of justice and grace. We would be paragons of justice and grace. Mawla Ali Jan, Mawla Ali Jan. امیر المؤمنین یا شاه مردان یا شاه مردان یا شاه مردان. For haq and batil, you are the mizan, you are the mizan, Mawla Ali Jan. The world is still in awe from Badr o Hunain, but your true miracles are Zainab Hussain. For 14 centuries no one has surpassed the standards that they set for standing steadfast. The standards that they set for standing steadfast. Mawla Ali Jan, Mawla Ali Jan. امیر المؤمنین یا شاه مردان یا شاه مردان یا شاه مردان. For haq and batil, you are the mizan, you are the mizan, Mawla Ali Jan. Salawat.
Thank you, Murtaza, for that very excellent recitation. I would now like to call Hussein Aqil for a nasheed. Please recite a loud salawat.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, I'd like to begin, but before I begin, I'd like to say I myself could not possibly give enough honor to these two great Eids that we're celebrating. So I will need everyone's help here in our recitation of what I'm about to recite. And inshallah, the chorus is very simple. And if you guys could all just join in with me, that would be great. And I'll begin after a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So again, the chorus is pretty simple. It goes, our path is Ali, our guide is Ali, Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali. If nothing else, just say the Alis and then we'll be good, okay? All right, inshallah, I'll go again. Our path is Ali, our guide is Ali, Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali. Our path is Ali, our guide is Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali. Our path is Ali, our guide is Ali, Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali. Feel free to clap as well, okay? Inshallah. Our path is Ali, our guide is Ali, Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali. Our path is Ali, our guide is Ali, Mawla Ali. In the world of love, I saw him eyes first, a beloved who quenches a lover's thirst. In the world of love, I saw him eyes first, a beloved who quenches a lover's thirst. If they put him last, then I'll start from last. If they put him last, then I'll start from last. For my first is Ali, and my last is Mahdi. Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali. Our guide is Ali, our path is Ali, Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali. Our guide is Ali, our path is Ali, Mawla Ali. One more time. Our path is Ali, our guide is Ali, Mawla Ali. On the love of your light I was raised. I was born in your name, I heard praised. On the love of your light I was raised. I was born in your name, I heard praise. In Ghadir, Islam with you was made. In Ghadir, Islam with you was made. Heard from Mother Ali, heard from Father Ali. Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is Ali, our guide is Ali. Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is Ali, our guide is Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is Ali. Mawla Ali, Mawla. When I see your shrine, I know that I'm home. You're the King of Kings, Najaf's your throne. When I see your shrine, I know that I'm home. You're the King of Kings, Najaf's your throne. With you by my side, I'm never alone. With you by my side, I'm never alone. Walking Quran, Ali. Ali, walking Quran, Ali, in my adhan, Ali. Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is Ali, our guide is Ali. Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is Ali, our guide is Ali. Mawla Ali, one more. Our path is Ali, our guide is Ali. Mawla. In our hearts your love can't be contained. To describe your worth words can't explain. In our hearts your love can't be contained. To describe your worth words can't explain. Your mercy we seek but never in vain. Your mercy we seek but never in vain. Who at Khaybar Ali, only Haydar Ali. Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is, our guide is Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is, our guide is Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is, our guide is Mawla Ali. In the world of love I saw him eyes first, a beloved who quenches a lover's thirst. In the world of love I saw him eyes first, a beloved who quenches a lover's thirst. If they put him last, then I'll start from last. If they put him last, then I'll start from last. For my first is Ali, and my last is Mahdi. Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is Ali, our guide is Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is, our guide is Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali, our path is Ali, our guide is Ali. Mawla Ali, Mawla Ali. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Thank you, Brother Hussein, for that very deep poem. I would now like to call Brother Ibrahim Mohseni for, I believe, a poem as well. Brother Ibrahim Mohseni, please recite aloud Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
How's everybody doing? Good? I gotta follow Hussein because that was too beautiful. One more salawat for Hussein, please. I recently read this book called Futuwa, and what is a beautiful from Brother Dawood Walid, and he's talking about the crisis that we're all facing. And it was interesting in the book. I wasn't expecting this. I have a few of his books, but from page 1 to the last page, all he's talking about fixing the ailments that unfortunately we're facing in our society with various crises. He said, Imam Ali, Imam Ali, Imam Ali, Imam Ali. We have the absolute best example, alhamdulillah. It's so beautiful when you really kind of contemplate that we have the answer in front of us crystal clear and it's not ambiguous. It's very, very beautiful. And us being here today celebrating this Eid, 2 Eids, Alhamdulillah, we could be doing something, wasting time, Netflix, video games, something. This is more important than everything else. We should give a salawat that we are able to have this love right now. Everybody. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So again, taking from Hussein, I need some crowd participation. I was working all day, my energy level's low, forgive me. But how many people heard that Sami Yusuf song, Who is the Loved One? You guys know that one? We're gonna do a practice real quick, but I was just thinking about it when I was driving here, and we're gonna change it though. But let's do a warm up, really? Who is the loved one? Then we say Allah. But there's a little rhythm to it. Hussein's gonna help me out. Who is the loved one? We gotta say Allah, kind of like Allah, right? Who is the loved one? Allah. Come on, inside, out. Who is the loved one? Allah. Now we're gonna change it, mashallah. Ready? Who is the loved one? Ali. Second time. Who is the loved one? Hassan. Third one. Who is the loved one? Hussein. Together with the rhythm. Ready? Who is the loved? Ali. Again. Ready? Bismillah. Who is the loved one? Ali. Who is the loved one? Hassan. Who is the loved one? Hussein. La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah Ali and No. We gotta say it like we mean it. We're gonna do it again. Ready? We're warming up. Who is Ali? Who is the loved one? Hassan. Who is the loved one? Hussein. La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah Ali. Ali is our Mawla. MashaAllah. Just warming us up. So the refrain for this qasida is really simple. It's Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Ya Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed names. Very, very easy. Let's warm up like we just did. Ready? Bismillah. Okay. So I need you guys' help again. Bismillah. Ready? Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed names. Everyone together. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed. More. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed. MashaAllah, we got it. Now we're going to add, following Hussein, my teacher, we're going to add in a clap too to keep our rhythm. Bismillah. We're going to go like this. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed. Together. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these. Who was cloaked in the cloth from Yemen? Who was cleansed with a verse from heaven? The Prophet made it clear who these people are. History wrote their names. At Mubahalah we say Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed names. Together. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed names. Raised by the Prophet and Bibi Khadija that sacrificed his life at the night of the Hijrah. Raised by the Prophet and Bibi Khadija, he sacrificed his life at the night of the Hijrah. La Fata illa Ali, La Saifa illa Zulfikar, the words of the Prophet. Fahada Alimullah, Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessings. Together. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessings. Together. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love. This daughter is Kauthar, the water of the Prophet. This daughter is Kauthar, the water of the Prophet. That means she gives life to the line of Imama. That means she gives life to the line of Imama. This daughter is Kauthar, the water of the Prophet. That means she gives life to the line of Imama. Though her life was short, she's the heart of Mustafa, the mother of Walaya. Abi, how we say, Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love. Together. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. One more time loud. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. MashaAllah.
The leaders of paradise, the leaders of the youth embodiment of the Prophet. For these two that is true. Preserving the Sunnah for every human being. Ahlul Bayt is the definition of Sirat al-Mustaqim. The leaders of paradise, the leaders of the youth embodiment of the Prophet. For these two that is true. Preserving the Sunnah for every human being. Ahlul Bayt is definition of Sirat al-Mustaqim. We say, Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra, we love these blessings. Together. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. As loud as possible. Loud. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. Do we love them again? Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. Who was cloaked in the cloth from Yemen, who was cleansed with a verse from heaven. The Prophet made it clear who these people are. History wrote their names at Mubahalah. Raised by the Prophet and Bibi Khadija, he sacrificed his life at the night of the Hijrah. La fata illa Ali, la saifa illa Zulfikar, the words of the Prophet. Fahada Ali Mola, the daughter is Kothar, the water of the Prophet. That means she gives life to the line of Imama. Though her life was short, she's the heart of Mustafa, the mother of Walaya, Umola Biha. The leaders of paradise, the leaders of the youth embodiment of the Prophet. For these two that is true. Preserving the Sunnah for every human being. Ahlul Bayt is definition of Sirat al-Mustaqim. Together. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these. Again. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these. One more time. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed names. Ali, Hassan, Ya Hussein, Fatima Zahra. We love these blessed names. Bismillah, brothers, I want to tell you this one thing. The verse in the ayah where it tells us we constantly need to be in dhikr of Allah. I heard Maulana is going to correct me. Please cut my tongue. I heard before from a sheikh recently, he said even thinking about Imam Ali during the time of the Prophet was his dhikr. Was a dhikr. Thinking of Imam Ali, I heard a narration, they said that the Prophet said even looking at Imam Ali was a dhikr Allah. It's a blessing that even right now, if we're driving, moving or anything, and we think about their names and think about the condition we're in, honestly, even thinking about them, think about what a blessing. It's a dhikr of Allah. Salawat to Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Please recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I would now like to call Hujjatul Islam Sayyid Sulaiman Hassan for a short speech. Please recite the loudest of salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Please be seated. Can you move this table back? Once again, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا الذين يقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة وهم راكعون. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be with all of you and Eid Mubarak on these two blessed occasions of Eid al-Ghadir and Eid al-Mubahalah, two events in which we remember the covenant that Allah made between our souls and our leaders and our guides, Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. Salawat ala Muhammad. And that covenant forms the strongest bond, even stronger than the bond that we have with our friends or with our families or with people that we may have known our entire lives and shared many experiences in our life with, because the bond with Ahlul Bayt transcends this life, both before we were sent into this world and after we will leave this world. That bond with Ahlul Bayt will be there for us, benefiting us and blessing us. And that is the bond that we remember in this month of Dhul Hijjah, and in particular at the time of Ghadir Khum and Mubahalah. It's a pleasure to see many people here, some haven't seen for a while and some that we are seeing for the first time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of us the love and the connection to Ahlul Bayt that is a source of our salvation and our success in this life and in the hereafter. We will be concluding the program with Salatul Maghrib wal Isha, and we have a short quiz and activity, especially for the younger members of the community, to remind ourselves of some of the facts and the importance associated with these two important events. And in the time that we have, I want to just give a brief message to remind myself and all of us present about what Ghadir and what Eid al-Mubahalah represent. There are a number of values that we have associated with our connection to Ahlul Bayt, our obligation to Ahlul Bayt. One of them is mawaddah, the obligation to love them. One of them is ita'ah, to obey them. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. O believers, obey God and obey the Prophet and obey those who have been given authority and command over you. So we have a relationship of obedience to Ahlul Bayt. We have a relationship of love for Ahlul Bayt. But then there is a third concept, a third value that is part of our Islamic beliefs and practices. And that is known as wilayah. And wilayah is a comprehensive term that encompasses our relationship to God and our relationship to our Prophet and our relationship to the family and the progeny of our Prophet Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. Salawat ala Muhammad. Allah says in the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Your wali is derived from wilayah. Wilayah is a certain type of a relationship that we'll talk about. And a person who has that relationship is a wali. إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا. Your wali, your person whom you are wilayah is only Allah and His Prophet and those who believe, those who establish and pay of state of ruku' in worship. It might seem that this is a relation of connectedness. Of in the plural. In this, and there is a difference. والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء. They are believing men and believing women are connected to one another because we are one community and one. And the success of any one of us is a triumph and a source of happiness for the entire community. We're not competing with one another, but rather we are of one another. The advancement, the success, the triumph of any one of us is a triumph of our collective. And the hardship that any one of us faces is not just their problem, their concern, they should figure it out, but it is an issue and a concern for. And so in that way, al-mu'minun and al-mu'minat, the believing men and the believing women, they are awliya, connected to one another in a fraternal relationship, in a relationship that might not be a blood tie or a biological tie, but it is a spiritual bond that is even more important than our family bonds and our biological relationships. There the Quran speaks of awliya in the plural. But here, when the Quran talks about Allah wa rasuluhu walladhina amanu, the Quran doesn't say our children may pull us in one direction, our parents may pull us in another direction, and then we may have a spouse, we may have friends, we may have so many other demands that others place on us, and so many demands and wants that we place upon our own shoulders, and that may seem to scatter us, to distract us. In some cases, it overwhelms us. But there is a source of unity in all of those multiple relationships, and that is the essence of wilayah. And that is why in Surah Al-Ma'idah, we don't say, إِنَّمَا أَوْلِيَاؤُكُمْ Allahu wa rasuluhu walladhina amanu. This is not just speaking about a relationship that we have with others, a lateral relationship, a horizontal relationship, a friendship and a connection. But this is speaking of a unifying relationship that takes all of that multiplicity and refines it into a single concern and a single devotion. And that is the wilayah that brings us to Allah, and through Allah brings us to His Prophet, and through Allah and His Prophet brings us to those infallible leaders who are there for our inspiration and our guidance. And then through Allah and His Prophet and the successors of His Prophet ties us to our fellow believers and to humanity and to all of God's creation. It's not many different relationships, but it is a single relationship. It is a single love and a single devotion that we have that has many different rays and many different reflections within our life. But it doesn't cause us distraction and confusion. It brings us tranquility and peace, because all of those obligations and all of the roles that you and I may have in life, they are for Allah and through Allah. And if we keep our obligation to Allah front and center in our mind and our heart and in our soul, then all of those other relationships, they will gradually fall into place within our life. And the Quran draws our attention to the unity implicit in wilayah by saying, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. There is a single wilayah, and there is a single wali. There is a single source of that connection that you have, and that is your relationship to God, and your relationship to God's Prophet, and your relationship to the heirs and the successors of God's Prophet. They are al-Ladhina amanu. Not just anybody who has maybe a casual connection to Islam, but those who are the source of the protection of Islam and the protection and the spread of Iman and faith throughout the world. They are the ones who الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. They are the ones who are the symbols of prayer and the symbols of charitableness and alms and sacrificing in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Through them, we learn those values, we affirm, and we live those values in our own life. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So there is a unity in our relationship, and that is what wilayah means. The literal meaning of wilayah is a close and an intimate connection. Something where there is no separation. And the essence of Islam is to keep us connected. Our materialist culture and society, it separates us. Sometimes, even from those closest to us, we feel a distance or a separation. Our parents will never find anybody that is more blessed for us than our parents. Most of us, we have parents that pray for us, that guide us, that sacrifice their own needs and their own comfort for our sake. And in some cases, we may have parents that are not present or not able to fulfill that obligation as it was decreed and as it was taught by Allah. But if you look at the history of the dear ones of Allah, the awliya, those friends of God who reached a high spiritual state, it wasn't always because their mother did wudu and then fed them a morsel of food, because their father always taught them the values of Islam. In some cases, they had parents who were not believers, or were not pious, or were not kind. But because they honored their obligation to their parents, Allah raised their rank in this world and in the hereafter and blessed them. So our parents are a source of blessing. If they are pious and believers and a guide for us and a source of support and advice and strength for us, then because they are giving us a visible and an apparent bounty. And if they are not present for us in that way, maybe because they are not alive, maybe because they are not healthy, maybe because they don't have those attributes, then honoring our relationship to our parents is still a source of blessing for us. Because their existence and the place that Allah has given them in our lives gives them that effect and that benefit for us. So our parents, our family, all of those other relationships, they are important. But they are important not for their own sake. They are important because all of those relationships are gifts from God. They are important because all of those relationships are tests from God. And so when I love my family, when I want to be with my friends, when I have any other relationship with any human being, or even a hobby or an activity that I enjoy, then I should remember that it is from God and for God that I should honor that relationship, that I should love anything that I enjoy in my life. And if I do so, then that object of my love will bring me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and never separate me from God. Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam are the most important relationship that we have. Before any other relationship. And our obligation to them comes before our obligation to anyone else. And because it is a relationship that is based on love, we find that when our Prophet wanted to introduce Ahlul Bayt to the believers, he introduced them as being the most beloved of all of humanity to the Prophet. I want to move towards the conclusion of this presentation with the answer to a very common question that I've heard from people. That when we talk about the virtues of Ahlul Bayt, or when we talk about the reason why we follow Ahlul Bayt and we don't follow any of the other companions of the Prophet in the same way. Lovers of Ahlul Bayt honor the companions of the Prophet, and Imam Ali and our Imams, they also honored and loved the companions of the Prophet. But the love that we have for believers, the love that we have for those who sacrificed in the way of Islam and paved the way for Islam to the coming generations. Not the same way that we love Ahlul Bayt with all of our heart and with our obedience and preferring their teachings and their will above our own desire and our own will. When we talk about the preference of Ahlul Bayt over all other who were associated with our Prophet, one very common question is, why are so many of those ahadith not explicit ahadith that say you must follow and obey Ahlul Bayt? Many of those ahadith are just a general form of explanation of the love that the Prophet had for Ahlul Bayt. And some people say that these ahadith are not relevant to the establishment of the position of Ahlul Bayt. If we say, for example, that Allah has removed all impurity from Ahlul Bayt, if we say that the most beloved person to the Prophet was his daughter Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha, and then the only other person who could compare with the Prophet's love for Lady Fatima was her husband, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. So when we have a hadith like this, which are widely transmitted, this particular hadith is transmitted from the Prophet's wife Aisha. She said that the most beloved person was Lady Fatima, unless it was her husband Amir al-Mu'mineen. Then people say, well, that doesn't prove that they are imams, that they are ma'soom, that we have to follow them and we have to obey them. There are other ahadith that speak about how Allah loves Imam Ali because of his sacrifice in the Battle of the Trench, the Battle of the Allies. His victory in the Battle of Khaybar, and at so many other places in the early history of Islam. But then some people say, well, that doesn't prove that Imam Ali was to be the Imam or the successor of the Prophet. The answer to that question is to understand what is the basis of our connection to Imam Ali. If we understand that the basis of our connection to Imam Ali is to appreciate that he was a walking and a speaking personification of all of the prophetic values and all of the teachings of Islam and of the entire message of the Quran, then we don't have any question that all of these ahadith are explaining to us that person of Imam Ali. And the only logical conclusion from the totality of those ahadith is that there is nobody worth preferring in our love and in our obedience to Imam Ali. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The reality of Islam is that we don't increase in our faith just through our conscious effort. We don't become truly pious only through logic, only through work. Logic is important, and that's why Allah has given us a mind to think. Effort is important, and that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us certain obligations to fulfill. But the essence of our faith and the source of attaining closeness to Allah, first and foremost, is an emotional and a spiritual connection with God. And then the effort comes after that. The understanding comes after that. Sometimes we don't understand things until we have experienced them. And then we have learned through the ups and downs of our life what is truly important and what is not important, what is right and what is wrong. The essence is a spiritual connection. And therefore, many of the ahadith of the Prophet, they focus on that emotional and that spiritual connection to Ahlul Bayt, so that we understand the source of our faith to exist and to thrive, over which that foundation is the basis over which we place additional layers of contemplation, additional layers of effort and work. But the foundation, for it to be strong, it must be rooted in love. And that is why the Quran tells us that even if you follow the Prophet, then it is because of love of God. In kuntum tuhibbun Allah, fattabi'uni. If you love God, then follow me. So why do so many of the ahadith that talk about the virtues of Imam Ali and that talk about the virtues of Fatimatul Zahra and the virtues of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam, why do they just talk about how much God loved them and how much the Prophet loved them and how courageous and how generous and how altruistic and how wonderful they were? Because when we understand those values and we appreciate those values, then we begin to become attracted to them. And we begin to give them more importance in our life than our own feelings and our own preferences and our own desires. And then they become like a gravitational force that pulls us towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And wilayah is the name of that force. al-Ghadir is not when Allah first appointed Imam Ali as the successor to his Prophet, but it is when Allah commanded the Prophet to make a public proclamation of the same message that our Prophet had given in many forms and in many ways throughout his life. Just in the last few weeks before the Prophet's own death, he proclaimed in front of tens of thousands of people on his return from the farewell pilgrimage in a land between Mecca and Medina known as al-Ghadir Khum, the pond of Khum, that, "O Allah, I will fulfill the command you gave me in the Quran to convey your message." And then he called the people, and there were tens of thousands of people in front of the Prophet. And he said, "Man kuntu mawlahu, fahada aliyun mawlah." Whoever I am the Mawla, the Wali, the person who has that wilayah and that connects people to Allah, if you have that wilayah with the Prophet, then you must have that wilayah with Imam Ali. And the meaning of that wilayah is explained by the prayer the Prophet made after that sentence, so that it can't have any other meaning but the person with authority and the leader and the guide and the master. Allahumma wali man wala wa aadi man aada. Oh Allah, love those who love Imam Ali, and be an enemy of those who are enemies of Imam Ali. Wansur man nasarah, wakhdhul man khadhalah. Oh Allah, help those who help Ali, and leave and abandon those who abandon Ali. That is the message of Ghadir Khum. And in Mubahalah we have a broader example of the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt, the same message, but this is after the conquest of Mecca, before the events of Ghadir Khum, when the Christians of Najran came to discuss and reached a dead end. And then the Prophet said that there is another way to establish the truth, other than discussion and debate. You believe that you are worshipping Allah according to His true commandments, and we believe we are worshipping Allah according to His true commandments. You are convinced you are right, and we are convinced that we are right, so you come and pray to God, and we come to pray to God, and then we will ask God to show who is right. And the Prophet brought himself, and Imam Ali, and Lady Fatima, and Imam Hassan, and Imam Hussein, alayhimus salatu wassalam. Sallu ala Muhammad. And he said that these are the ones who will come with me and partake in that prayer to demonstrate the truth of Islam. It isn't that the companions weren't there. It isn't that the household of the Prophet did not have other members, or the Prophet did not have other relatives or other close companions. But there was nobody else who could come in that place and fulfill that role and stand before Allah and say that, are we true, and is our life and our example, in addition to our belief and our words, the representation and the manifestation of truth? It was only those 4 people who came with our Prophet who were able to convey that message. So Ghadir and Mubahalah have the same message. Ghadir is specifically about Imam Ali, and Mubahalah is a broader canvas that shows us the importance of Ahlul Bayt. And for our own spiritual development, we shouldn't think that we're going to become a better Muslim just by trying to figure everything out on our own. When we have an elder, a teacher, a parent who gives us advice, we don't have to argue with everything or debate everything. Sometimes it is important for us to listen and learn how to be humble. And then gradually, as the love of God and the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt fills our heart and our soul, we begin to perceive things that are not visible to the physical senses. And we move closer to Allah, and we experience in our lives the bounties and the blessings that come from that connection. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of us present and all mu'mineen throughout the world to give us a true wilayah and connection to Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. May we truly consider their teachings to be the source of our guidance and their values to be the basis of our life and their commandments to be more important than anything that somebody else might tell us or anything that our own heart may desire. And if Allah introduced wilayah to us through His own essence, the divine essence, and through our Prophet, and through the first of our Imams, Imam Ali, then Allah has connected that wilayah all the way to the Imam of our time, Hujjat ibn al-Hasan, al-Qa'im, al-Mahdi, ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-Sharif, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so as we remember and celebrate the first of our Imams and his leadership and authority, let us also remember and pray to Allah for the fulfillment of His promise and the appearance of our final wali, our final Imam, the Imam of our time, the awaited one, the promised one, who shall fulfill God's promise and establish the message of Islam and the system of truth and justice in every corner of the earth. That is our prayer on this occasion of Eid, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hear our prayer and to fulfill our wish through the barakah of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum.
Everyone, please stay seated. We're just setting up a quiz. So everyone, please stay seated for just a couple minutes while we get everything set up. All right, everyone, please recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
What I'm doing all the All right, you start the intro.
All right, so this is going to be a quiz on Eid al-Ghadir and Eid al-Mubahalah. So everyone, please pay attention to the screen. You'll be able to see the questions and the answer choices. So we'll begin after a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The first question is, when did the event of Ghadir Khum take place? 3 years before the Prophet's migration to Medina, in the year of the conquest of Mecca, in the final year of the Prophet's life, or in the year of the immigration to Medina? Think carefully and raise your hand when you have an answer. All right, I think I saw your hand up first.
C.
Yeah, so the correct answer was C. Please recite aloud salawat. Okay. So there's prizes for everyone who gets the answer correct. So Ali, if you want to go and get the prize. The next question is...
All right. The second question is, when did the event of Mubahalah take place? A. 3 years before the Prophet's migration to Medina. B. After the conquest of Mecca. C. Just before the Battle of Khaybar. Or D. In the year of the migration, Hijrah, to Medina. Anyone?
Is it the second one after the conquest of Mecca?
All right, so no, the answer is not B. That was close though.
C.
All right, yes, the correct answer is C. Just before the Battle of Khaybar. Sorry, B is correct. All right, sorry about that. So you do get a prize. That's our fault. Sorry. All right.
You do it and then I'll do it.
All right. Question 3 is, which religious group was involved in the event of Mubahalah? A, the Jews of Medina, Yathrib. B, the Jews of Yemen. C, the polytheists of Mecca. Or D, the Christians of Najran.
D, the Christians of Najran.
That is the answer. Well done.
If everyone was paying attention, they should have gotten that one.
All right. Fourth question. How old was Imam Ali alayhi salam at the event of Ghadir? A, 33 years old. B, 20 years old. C, 40 years old. Or D, 50 years old.
C?
Is the answer C? Unfortunately, it is not. Anyone else?
Is it A, 33 years old?
That is the answer. Loud salawat.
The next question is, which of the following verses was not revealed about Ghadir Khum? A, today the unbelievers have lost hope about your religion. B, indeed Allah intends to remove impurity from you, O people of the house. C, O messenger, convey what has been revealed to you from your Lord. Or D, a person asked about a punishment that will take place.
B.
Is the answer B? All right, yes it is. Loud salawat. Question 6. How many people went with the Prophet ﷺ for the event of Mubahalah? Anyone?
D.
That is the answer. Loud salawat.
All right, question 7. So this question will have a prize, unfortunately. What event took place immediately before the event of Ghadir? A, the farewell pilgrimage, B, the conquest of Mecca, C, the event of Mubahalah, or D, the conquest of Khaybar?
It's A.
All right, yeah, the answer to that one is A. Unfortunately, there is no prize for that question.
All right, question 8. What does the word Ghadir mean in Arabic? Sayyid Sulaiman did mention this in his speech. A, a large gathering place. B, a barren desert. C, a pond of water. Or D, a resting place for travelers.
C.
Again, that is the answer. Loud salawat.
Question 9 is, who were the main opponents of Imam Ali after the event of Ghadir? A, the hypocrites, B, the polytheists, C, the Ansar, or D, the Jews?
D.
Unfortunately, that is not the correct answer.
A.
That is the answer. Loud salawat. All right, next question. Which of the following cities did Imam Ali alayhi salam never live in during his life?
A.
Is it A? No, unfortunately, it is not A. Anyone else?
D. Najaf.
Answer D. Yes, it is. Loud salawat.
Where is Ghadir Khum located? Between Mecca and Medina, between Mecca and Yemen, between Kufa and Karbala, or between Medina and Kufa? For future questions, please make sure to raise your hand after the question is completed.
C. A.
All right, that answer was correct. Please recite aloud salawat.
Next question. Which of the following is not recommended on Eid al-Ghadir? A, it is not recommended to fast. B, it is not recommended to do ghusl, full bath. C, it is not recommended to congratulate believers for Eid. Or D, it is not recommended to recite the Eid prayer, Salatul Eid. A? Unfortunately, the answer is not A.
Is it B?
The answer is D. Loud salawat.
The answer is D, to recite the Eid prayer. Question 13. What does the word Mubahalah mean? A mutual prayer for God to demonstrate whose beliefs are correct. B, a debate about religious beliefs. C, a demonstration of the truth of Islam. Or D, an announcement of the leadership of Ahlul Bayt.
Is the answer A?
Yeah, the correct answer is A. Please recite a loud salawat.
Alright. In the verse of Mubahalah, what is Imam Ali alayhi salam referred to as? A, the son of the Prophet. B, the best of believers. C, the self of the Prophet. Or D, the leader of the believers.
She said C.
All right, yes, that is the correct answer.
This is the second to last question, so please pay attention. In which chapter of Quran is the verse of Mubahalah found? A, Surah Al-Imran. B, Surah Ma'idah. C, Surah Ma'arij. Or D, Surah Al-Bayyinah. Did one of them raise his hand first?
A.
Yes, that is the correct answer. Please recite a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
All right, last question. In which chapter of the Quran are the verses of Ghadir found? A, Surah Ali Imran. B, Surah Al-Ma'idah. C, Surah Al-Insan. Or D, Surah Yasin.
A.
No.
All right, anyone else?
B.
That is the answer. Last question, loud salawat.
All right, that concludes the quiz game we had for Eid al-Ghadir and Eid al-Mubahalah. Please recite a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.